I know right now times are tough financially. Economy is difficult, so things are going great on that aspect. But you need to be careful of these cheap quotes, and we've seen a lot of it, especially over the past couple of years, where guys are really starting to undercut. Customer might see, for example, we give a quote for 75,000, let's just say, and the competitor gives a quote for 50,000. They're like, well, it's the same thing, but in reality, it's not. And you really need to take your time to dissect that. We actually offer a service which is a quote comparison service, which means we will sit down with you and look at the quotes and do a comparison, which is, by the way, quite difficult. These quotes a lot of times are just an Excel sheet. It makes it difficult to see the differences between things, like the installation methods. Let's just say your hardwood floors. Are you nailing them down, or are you also nailing them and gluing them down? You know, little things like this can actually make a big difference. You got to pay for the glue. There's a little bit extra on the install. So now in turn, our quote is higher than the competitor, but that floor is not going anywhere, right? But if your nails start to tell, you might see this floor start to move around. So it can be very difficult, which is why it's important to, you know, even if you don't have it like us, we'll do the comparison for you. But if not, do it yourself and ask these questions, do your research, and have a good understanding of exactly what you are getting. Because a lot of times, if it's that much cheaper, they're cutting corners, and people need to really be aware of that in the situation that we're dealing with.
Welcome to the Ontario Homeowners Show. I'm Mohsen Lakhani, and this is the show where we get real about what it takes to own, maintain, and love your home. From renovations to raising a family, legal insights to mental health, no topic is off limits. This is about real people, real value, and real conversations to help you live better, right where you are. Each week, I sit down with trusted experts, service professionals, and local changemakers to bring you the strategies, stories, and solutions that make homeownership easier. This is the Ontario Homeowners Show, powered by the Vaughan Real Estate Advisors. Are you ready? Let's go. Riley, thank you so much for joining us at the Ontario Homeowners Show. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, man. First off, thank you for having me, and very excited to be here and looking forward to getting into it.
The honor's mine, my man. Let's start by telling us a little bit about you and Big Dog Renovations. What have you guys been up to?
So I'm Riley. I'm the founder of Big Dog Renovations here in the GTA, and we're basically a one-stop shop for anybody that's looking to do a renovation or remodel project. So mainly what we focus on is residential projects, which would include things like basements, bathrooms, kitchens, even full home renos. However, we are growing our commercial side of things as well. So that's things like office buildings, restaurants, shops, clinics, these sort of things. We're also tapping into that side as well. Now, in terms of myself, kind of to give you a little bit of background, been in this industry basically since I was a teenager, and I've always loved it. I've always had a passion for it. Two different reasons for that is, you know, I guess the first major one is I am a creative person, so I do enjoy the creative aspects of renovations. So when you start with a reno, you're basically starting with a blank canvas, and you get to paint your picture, right? So I really enjoy that aspect of it. I also enjoy the challenges that come with the business. You know, for example, let's say we're dealing with a space that's a very tight space and we need to design it in a way to make it very functional, or maybe we have an obstacle that we're working around and we need to come up with creative ideas to get around those things. To me, that's all one big game and something that I really enjoy. I guess the last thing that I would say, and kind of the reason for being in this business, is I also do truly love working with people. I think you know, we've shared a lot of great experiences with our clients, and we've helped a lot of people, and that's a very rewarding.
Amazing. Can you share with us a story where you've helped a homeowner through a tricky situation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could give you a number of different examples for that one. I guess the first one that comes to mind is one that we did just recently, and unfortunately, the client was dealing with a flood. If you remember last year in Toronto, especially in the Etobicoke neighborhood, there was some pretty serious floods that went on. We actually have a video of what it looked like when the basement was being flooded and water's just pouring in through the window like crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the whole basement was covered in mold, mildew. There was asbestos there. To add to this, I mean, the home was over 100 years old, so the place was already in really rough shape. So not only did we have to, rectify all of the issues with the flood, handle the water damage, take care of the mold, get rid of the asbestos, all of these things, but you're also dealing with a very old home that now you have to renovate. So, none of the
Mm,
walls are straight. There's mechanical all over the place that's been done by 20 people over the past 100 years. And it's a really big mess. So, that's definitely one where we were able to take a tricky situation and actually turn it into an opportunity for the client where now they have, a beautiful space, more functional space, all mechanical's been upgraded. It's 10 times better now. Taking a bad situation and turn it into a good one. Number of other examples as well. I mean, we had a project last year that we did, which was a project takeover, which basically means that there was another contractor that came in and messed up a lot of work. So we had to come in and rectify that situation. And that can always be difficult as well because you're working off of what somebody else has done and what they did was not done properly. So it just makes it a lot more difficult than if you were just to deal with a blank canvas or start from a blank canvas.
sounds like an expensive fix.
Yeah, it can definitely add up thousands of dollars. So it's not cheap. And this is one of the reasons it's important to make sure that you work with somebody that knows what they're doing and you do it right the first time and you don't cut any corners.
Tell me about that. I don't know what to do, who to contact. And the only thing I have is to go off of other contractors, other companies out there, and their word. What do I need to be aware of when I'm contacting these people?
I think, first off, if you're looking for a company to do a renovation, you want to make sure you do a little research before you actually give them a call. So that's like checking online, checking for reviews, and maybe it's a referral. You can talk to the person about their experience with them, and make sure that it's
Mm,
a company that does have a good reputation and a proven track record. There's a number of other things you're going to want to look out for as well. If you're working with a contractor that is not using a contract, not doing proper estimates and just giving you kind of a quote, word of mouth or sorry, just kind of, verbally. You want to make sure that you get everything in writing and you have a very good understanding of what's in that quote and what is going to be done. So that there's, no confusion down the line.
mm, okay. It's tough to be able to spend thousands of dollars getting these renovations done, but at the end of the day, you got to find that balance between what's going to cost me money versus save me time and added peace of mind and less stress. So that's the
Yeah.
balance I feel like a lot of homeowners need to find.
I think it's a balance that a lot of people are kind of struggling with right now, especially because, financially, a lot of people, it's a difficult time. The economy in Canada and in Toronto is not exactly doing great.
Mm,
And with that, you see people trying to save a lot of money. And what we've seen, especially over the past couple of years, is a lot of people chasing those cheap quotes.
yeah.
And you do have to be careful exactly for the reasons that you mentioned. Usually if something is if it's much cheaper than another quote, it's too good to be true. Oftentimes there's corners that are being cut and that in turn can cost you a lot more in the long run. When you're doing a renovation, we always speak with our clients about looking at the total cost of your renovation, which means how much did the renovation cost you for the duration of you being in the home? So if this is a kitchen and you're going to be in the home for the next 15, 20 years, if you do it once and you do it right, well, that's a one-time investment. But let's say you cut corners and you go with a cheaper contractor who's maybe not usually using as good of trades. Maybe the materials are not as good. Maybe the installation methods that they're using are not as good as well. And in turn, that means that kitchen is only going to last 5 to 10 years. So you
Mm,
actually end up, spending just as much as you would have if you did it right the first time and you go through more headaches and another renovation, which we all know. I mean, rentals can be a lot of fun to do, but also very stressful for homeowners at times.
yeah.
So every time you got to do a rental, it can be a headache for people. You got to get out of the house. There's a mess in the house and this and that. You got to pour money into it. A lot of time and effort goes into it. Again, one of the reasons why it's very important to do it right and do it once, and as opposed to trying to skim and save and end up costing you more in the long run.
What are your thoughts on, let's say, a company like IKEA has, ready to go product that you can literally order and install yourself versus getting custom or maybe not custom, but something where, working with you or working with another manufacturer, they can pick and choose what they want and somebody comes in and installs it. How is that different?
I think both have their place in the market, and it really depends on what you're doing. For
Mm-hmm.
example, if you're doing just a basement kitchen, it's not your main kitchen, you might consider using prefab products because a lot of times it's not a kitchen that's going to be used very heavily, and you don't need to go with a custom setup. It also does depend on the space itself because if you're working with a tricky space in terms of the dimensions, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to want to make sure that you go custom so that that cabinetry fits in nicely. You don't have too many filler pieces and
Right.
and this sort of stuff. The other thing is if you're really looking to personalize your kitchen, what I mean by personalize is, maybe you want drawers here. You want, a spice rack here. You want
Mm.
this there and that there. And you really want to have the play, then going custom is going to make sure that that kitchen is personalized and customized to what you want, which can definitely have a big difference. Again, I think there is, or both are valid. It just depends on the situation that you're in.
Makes sense.
I will say as well, one of the things is, with that, when people say, oh yeah, I'll just buy IKEA cabinets and go in and put them up myself, we see a lot of homeowners nowadays trying to do DIYs. And not that, we're saying nobody do a DIY and it's guaranteed to go wrong, but a lot of times there's a big difference in quality from, let's say, a homeowner doing a DIY project than a cabinetry installer who's been installing cabinets for 20 years doing it. And a lot of
Mm.
that just comes down to little details, right? And those little
Right.
details can have a big difference. But when you've been doing something for 20 years, that's really what makes you know all the little details, all the little intricacies that are going to make a big difference when it comes to the final product. So if you're
Right.
looking to have something like the highest quality, it's always best to work with a specialized trade, which is exactly what we offer at Big Dog.
Amazing. Can I put you on the spot for a second?
Yeah, sure.
I'm all about DIY, and I recommend, you don't always have to find somebody to come and fix it or
Yeah.
install something, right? Is there a piece of advice you can give to homeowners who might be looking to go the DIY route? Save a little bit of money, save a little bit of stress, but they're adamant they want to go ahead and do it themselves. What do you recommend they should do?
Tough because, first off, if you're planning on doing something like that, my advice is make sure you definitely research in terms of what goes into it and see, if it's something that you think that you can take on. If it's little things, it's fine. You want to change a piece of trim, you want to swap out a door, you want to do some painting. That stuff is okay, but a lot of times clients don't exactly know what they're getting into. For example, some clients are like, hey, I'm just going to remove this wall and open up my kitchen. I know it's not a structural wall. It's not a big deal. But
Mm-hmm.
if you remove that wall, you got to then fix the floor. You also have to fix the ceiling. And then whatever's in that wall, mechanical relocations need to be moved around.
Mm.
Oftentimes when those move around, now you got to cut open holes in other walls, move this around, move that around. So this is why, again, it's important if you're planning on doing a DIY project to make sure that you have a good understanding of it. Not every company will do this, but if you were to call us, for example, we're happy to actually guide you through it. We're obviously we want business, we want clients to buy from us, but the biggest thing that we try and do at Big Dog is build relationships with our clients, long-term relationships. And sometimes that's just simply giving somebody advice. Like, hey, if you're planning on doing DIY, make sure you pick up this, make sure you get that, make sure you do this. And that way it's going to go smoothly for you. So talk to
Amazing.
the professional, hopefully you have somebody in your life or, you can always reach out to us and we can kind of guide you through that and let you know exactly what you're getting into. And you can decide if it's something that you think you're comfortable with or not.
Brilliant.
The other thing
Brilliant.
I will kind of just go a little bit further off of that. And it also really does depend on the quality of things because and I'll give you a good example of this. It's not necessarily a DIY example, but it plays into this. Funny enough, my mother just had her deck stained recently, and she came to me and asked me who should stain my deck. She lives in Ottawa, I'm in Toronto, so we can't do it for her. But she's like, who should I get to do it? And should I do it myself? Should I hire this guy that worked on my basement, on my this, on my that, like her general handyman guy? And I told her, look, if you want a finish that's okay or good, then yes, go ahead, do a DIY, go ahead and hire this guy. But if you want this to look really good, and in her particular case, The deck is really old. It's really beat up. It needs a lot of love and it needs special care and attention.
Mm.
So I had told her, make sure that you go work with somebody that does staining day in and day out, whether that's, your paint company, your flooring company. A lot of these guys are the guys that are doing the staining day in, day out, or deck company as well, right? But anyways, bottom line is she didn't listen, and she decided to hire Chuck in a truck, let's say, to come and do it. And the guy ended up doing the staining in the heat wave that we just had, which is
My gosh.
35, 40 degrees. If you know anything about staining, I mean, I'm not even a guy that does, personally, I haven't done a ton of staining, but obviously I know enough to know that you don't install that stuff in the heat like that. She hired him, he did it, and it was a terrible job. Blotchy as hell, this and that. She told the guy, hey, what's going on? Can you come back, fix this? Can I get my money back? And of course, the guy just completely ghosted it. So she's very upset. Of course, I'm upset as my mother as well. Like, I want to make sure she's treated properly and people are servicing her the right way. But unfortunately, she didn't listen to me, and she suffered the consequences, I guess you could say.
Darn. That's unfortunate. Sometimes we just gotta let our loved ones fly.
Sometimes you just got to let it play out and let them figure it out themselves.
Cool. So speaking of that, who's your ideal client? Who do you enjoy working with the most?
I always make the joke that my ideal client would be somebody that gives me a blank check and a canvas, like a big basement or a big house or whatever, and just tells me, go nuts, do what you want to do.
Love
Design
it.
it how you want to design it and this and that. But if we're talking more realistically, day-to-day stuff, I think the important thing is to have a client that trusts you. And I understand in this industry, it can be tough to build trust. There are a lot of nightmare stories out there, and we've seen them firsthand as well. So there is valid reasons for people to have these concerns. But working with a client that doesn't trust you, it makes things 10 times more difficult. We've had projects where we take over the project for a contractor that didn't do a good job, and those clients are come into that so distrusting and hurt from the last guy that they end up taking it all out on you, and everything just becomes more difficult to do. So I think having that layer of trust between both parties is important. I also do think that having a client with realistic expectations makes a big difference too.
Mm.
And I think that it's the contractor's job to set those expectations, but there needs to be that understanding of those expectations between them.
What causes unrealistic expectations?
People who are inexperienced, they might not have done it before. They might have heard a story from their friend who told them, this is how it's done and this and that. But most of the time, it's really inexperience. A lot of our clients, if you've been through rentals before, you kind of understand this stuff. So those clients are a lot easier to work with. People who are just getting into this and don't have the understanding of it, their expectations might not be realistic. But again, I think that it falls on the contractor or builder or whoever to make sure that those expectations are clearly set with the client and they have a good understanding of them before getting started, or else unfortunately, it could lead to issues down the line. So, yeah, setting clear expectations and having a client who understands those expectations and is realistic with it, a very important thing.
Cool. So what happens, you set the expectation, you're working the job, and everything's progressing the way it should be until there's a wrinkle in the project, something where it shouldn't have been or something worse than it was presented. What happens then?
I mean, it really depends on the scenario, but I will say that this is construction. So those scenarios happen. Definitely, there's surprises with construction. We don't have X-ray vision. So if we go in, let's say, and do a demo and we find this and that, that can be something that was unexpected for us and for them. But again, what we typically do before signing a client up is make that clear to them. Like during this project, this is construction and there can be certain things that pop up. I need to make sure that you're aware of that and that you have a contingency set aside for that, which is why we always encourage our clients to budget at least 10% of their project towards contingencies. Because these things can happen. And any contractor who sits in front of you and tells you everything's going to be absolutely perfect and I know it, most of the time they're lying to you unless it's a very simple project. So, you have to be prepared for those scenarios. Now, that being said, if it's an unexpected thing that was caused on our behalf, I can only speak about what we would do. but we always make sure that we're held accountable to our mistakes. And we are
Hmm.
humans. Mistakes happen. They aren't very often, but they do happen. And you need to make sure, again, when picking a contractor, that you feel like you're working with someone who will take responsibility for those things. And we make that very clear to our clients. We put it in a contract and all this stuff. So if those type of unexpected things pop up, we're held accountable. We take care of it. We keep the ball rolling.
So taking accountability, yes, but also making sure that you guys are insured to make, if something was to go wrong, insurance can possibly kick in if it's something that's beyond.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, in that regard, if it's, in terms of that, yes, we have a full $5 million liability insurance to cover the customer's home, and we have WSW to cover all of our workers. We're also, of course, always working with licensed trades. These things are a good way to have a layer of protection, right?
Beyond just the build out, beyond just the renovations, how else are you helping homeowners?
Yeah. So really, we're actually a full design and build company. So what that means is we handle everything from A to Z for your rental. It's not just the renovation itself, it's everything that goes into the renovation. So that could include things like getting a permit for your project. Maybe there's an engineer that needs to come in and take a look at things. Obviously, the actual rental work itself, the design aspect of everything we take care of, even things like cleaning services, moving services. We try and make it so that it's a one-stop shop for you for anything related to a renovation. So, yeah, there's quite a few services that we cover.
Amazing. What is a common misunderstanding about home renos that you might want to address today?
There's definitely a number of them. One of the ones that comes to mind is permits.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times clients are not or in the understanding that they can make changes to their home without having to go through any permit process, such as, relocating things in your kitchen, adding a bathroom, or these sort of things. But unfortunately, that is not the case. For a lot of those changes, you will need a permit. So it's important to make sure that you know that when you get into your project.
I think part of that issue is also because the process of getting the permits from the city can often be tedious, right? We're seeing time and time again in the market that this basement is finished, it's beautifully done, but there's no permit attached to that dwelling, and then as a result, it's not considered a legal finished basement.
I would say, I mean, it does depend on your municipality. Certain municipalities are more backed up than others right now. Some have had issues. Like if you take Hamilton, for example, they got hacked, and their whole system had to change over to paper, back to paper.
Mm,
So with that, they're backlogged like crazy. But generally, these process, like the permit process, is there for good reason. It's to make sure that the work that's being done is being done properly, especially when it could have a major effect on the home or the safety. And if you take the example of a legal basement apartment, in my opinion, it's crucial to have a permit for that. You, at the end of the day, are now responsible for somebody that's living in your house. And if you don't take the proper precautions to make sure that your home is protected and the tenant is protected, that can lead to big issues. So we do see a lot of people deciding not to do permits. Take a place like Brampton, for example. A lot of houses are deciding to not do the permit because it does add significant cost and time to a project, because a lot of
mhm.
times with those permits, they're going to be asking for a number of upgrades that come with them that you would not need to do without a permit.
Hmm.
So definitely something to look out for, and make sure, if you're doing one of these projects, my advice is always make sure you get the permit.
Cool. What do you feel is the most overhyped yet will be short-lived trend in the renovation industry today?
I think right now, like especially with let's say kitchens, we see a lot of like flat slab going in, and this is not only for kitchens, but you could take modern homes, for example. A lot of like the doors they're doing now are flat slab and completely frameless. You also see this happening with kitchens. And it's great for a modern setup. If you have like a nice condo in Toronto and it's a new condo or whatever, and you have, flat slab cabinetry there, it can be a sleek look. But in my opinion, this is a trend that will fall off in probably, I don't know, 5, 10 years, let's say.
Hmm.
So it's important to make sure that you go with something that is timeless. You take a shaker style cabinet, for example, those will always be around, and they have been around for a long time, and they will continue to be around for a long time. So that's one of the things you need to look out for. And I guess that even goes into your previous question about the myths of renovations. And some people think trendy is the best. A lot of times it's not.
What other styles do you feel is timeless? What's evergreen?
Hardwood floors, like nice engineered hardwood or hardwood floors in general. I mean, you've seen those around forever. And if you have a nice hardwood floor, that stuff is going to last, and it's going to be around, and it looks great as well. I think it's interesting because it does change a lot, like even with, you take tiles, for example, you see a lot of porcelain tiles now, but previously it was ceramic. There's some guys that do the marbles. So it does change from thing to thing. I guess if I had to pin the one thing, it would be your flooring. That would be a big one. And,
I
shaker
agree.
style cabinetry, like we said.
Flooring, I definitely agree, because here's the reality. You're more often than not, you're going to get tired of whatever's trendy, right? Or whatever's evergreen. You're going to get tired looking at it. And we know one thing for sure. Homeowners want to live in their home. They're buying a home, they're customizing it, they're renovating it because they want to live in that home. However, getting trendy or not, how long are you going to be able to look at the same set of, let's say, finishes, fittings, fixtures in your kitchen and in your living room and your bedroom and your bathrooms, right? There's going to come a point, maybe 3 years, 5 years, 7 years from now, you're going to be like, okay, I want something different. I want a change of pace. For some, that might be moving into another home. For some, that might be, let's renovate again. Let's call Big Dog Renovations and go through the process again because they did such a great job last time. So I feel, yes, there needs to be a element of trend that helps you feel better, feel good. But something like flooring is something that you want that's going to last you 10, 15 years. And it's lasting because it's good quality, not just because it's trendy.
Yes. I do believe as well, there's a lot of brands that could be considered timeless, and what I mean by that is they're brands, like they're go-to brands that have been around for 100 years that you really can't go wrong with their stuff. Now, of course, styles play into the trendy and timeless sort of thing, but if you look at a brand like Moen for plumbing or Kohler for plumbing, they've been around for hundreds of years, and when you get those products, it's a great product.
Yep.
Lifetime warranties with those products and made properly, built to last, very good reputation behind them. So things like that are also things that I guess you could consider timeless, because I feel like they're a brand that's going to be around forever for this sort of stuff, and a brand that you can't really go wrong with. Of course, depending on the style.
I agree. Let's talk about paint for a second before we move on. The one thing that really annoys me is the full white or ash white paint in the entire home, and you've got white LEDs. Just gives it that lifeless, am I in a hospital vibe? What can people do to change that? Because we see a lot of homes that are being sold with that kind of paintwork done, with that kind of lighting done. What do you recommend if I'm buying a house like that today? What do you think I should do the first thing I move in?
I mean, look, if you're not a fan of the all white, which I think a lot of people aren't anymore, I think more of what everything is shifting to is your earth tones. So you do see the whites, but they're more off whites, or you have what we call a gray and a beige together. And you're seeing a lot more of these sort of setups, and then you use the trim to complement it and the ceiling to complement it. So I think more and more that's what you're going to see, and that's the advice that I would be giving to people is instead of going with the flat white and just a simple white, go with an off-white, go with a grayish, go with an earthy tone. Maybe it's a gray tone, maybe, something like this, a bluish tone. But bottom line is those earth tones are really what's hitting it.
I just got a light bulb moment. Anytime we're listing a home, we're talking about painting it to getting it ready to sell. Maybe it's just following that advice of going with the grays and the earth tones to just make sure that it's not.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it, and use a good product as well, right? Like we typically only work with Benjamin Moore, to work with Sherwin-Williams or Deluxe, but these are your premium paint brands, and believe it or not, it does make a big difference. So my advice would be shop with one of them premium brands, go with your earth tones, use the trim and the ceiling to complement it, especially your trim. You know, we see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
now, if you're looking for a good color, very popular one, we see Chantilly lace, which is somewhat of an off-white, whitish color, but it
Mm-hmm.
complements really well. Like if you have an off-white on your wall and you want a little bit more pop on the white on the trim, Chantilly lace is a great option. So it's something to consider.
Amazing. I have more questions. So
Please, go.
you're talking about cheap paint versus something that's a bit more quality, bit more pricier, but worth its weight. What's the biggest difference though in something that's cheap? It's still gonna. I paint it on. My house looks nice. I'm getting ready to sell. Is that is a buyer really going to be able to tell that much of a difference, or is it because of it's still going to last you 3 to 5 years, or is it because it's not going to last you not even a year or something like that?
It's usually when you're dealing with more of a premium paint, you're going to need to, you can do fewer coats, and oftentimes the finish is going to be more smooth and more consistent overall. So doing a cheap
Mm.
paint, you're going to have to slap on more coats, and it's just not going to have quite as smooth of a finish across. So I think those are really the key differences.
Have you ever walked away from a project? And if so, what happened and why?
We've never walked away from a project when we were actually on the project, but we have had to turn clients down before. And really, it
Mm-hmm.
goes back to having a level of trust and having realistic expectations.
Hmm.
With these particular clients, they did not have either. And there was actually a contractor that walked off the job previously. They were very hesitant to explain that situation to us the whole time that we were even just at the house quoting and this and that. Probably shouldn't mention, but the client was just standing all over our back and looking over our shoulder and making it difficult for us to do our job. When we see clients that are red flags, a lot of what goes into that is distrust, unrealistic expectations, like I've been saying, and micromanagement. Three things are big red flags for us. Also, we look for if a client has had bad experiences with contractors before, meaning they kicked the contractor off the site or another contractor walked off of the site. Those are definitely things that are a red flag for us and that we need to be careful of. And if we feel like the risk is too high, we won't take the job. It's simply because we want to make sure that we're doing a good job for people and we're delivering what they want. And if we feel like there's no way that we can make that happen, what's the point in getting involved in it? You know, it's just going to be a huge headache. And even if we make a little money, you know, it might not be the best experience for us or the client. And overall, we need the balance of the two. We're not just here to make money. We want to make sure that we make people happy. And we improve their lives, right? So with that, if we don't think that we can do that because whatever clients unrealistic expectations, they're not trusting, they're trying to micromanage, that then we will walk.
Really, what's something that homeowners should be more cognizant of?
Thinking that a small change is very simple, but a lot of times there's a domino effect with renovations where you do one thing and now you got to do another thing and another thing. So oftentimes even small changes can lead to bigger changes, which people need to be wary of.
Mm.
A lot of times as well, clients think, you know, bigger is better. Bigger might not necessarily be better. It might be more important to focus on a specific aspect of that project and put more time and effort and design or whatever into that particular item than just
Mm-hmm.
adding more and more onto your project. You need to think about the things that you're adding, especially if you're planning on doing this for a return on investment. You know, again, those are things that a lot of times people will get mixed up in thinking that if they do this, you know, grandiose this and that, it's going to give them more value. When in turn, it's actually not as much value per dollar amount, if you understand what I'm saying,
I do.
as it would be if you focus more in on a specific.
You know what? That's a great point because we actually saw a report published by the National Association of Realtors. And the biggest return on investment that homeowners saw was getting their doors replaced.
Yeah. Wow.
It wasn't paint, it wasn't the roof, it wasn't the appliances, it wasn't the deck, the pool, whatever you want. It was getting the doors replaced, right?
Interesting.
Just
That, you know what? It's interesting. We talk about that a little bit on our side of things, being like the little things, trim, doors, paint can make a huge difference. But to know that
handles,
it's
door
door,
handles, cabinet handles.
Yeah, to hear that it's
Yeah.
specific to doors, I mean, that's the interesting stat to know. And I think that just is, to your point or to the point about, return on investment. It's important again to make sure that you understand these things because, like you said, you could have gone and spent all that money building this grandiose, whatever, living room, fireplace wall, whatever it is, thinking
Hmm.
it's going to attract somebody, it's going to spend more money on your place when in reality, just replace your doors,
Yeah. It's as
right?
simple as
So,
that.
I
Hey,
mean,
hey,
yeah,
Riley, can you come replace my door, please?
right. Yeah, simple enough, right?
What's one piece of advice you want to give homeowners about renovations and they'd actually listen?
One piece of advice. There's I guess, a lot of pieces of advice that go into it, but I think the biggest one right now is I know right now times are tough financially, economy is difficult, and so things aren't going great on that aspect. But you need to be careful of these cheap quotes. And we've seen a lot of it, especially over the past couple of years, where guys are really starting to undercut. And, customer might see, for example, we give a quote for 75,000, let's just say, and the competitor gives a quote for 50,000. They're like, well, it's the same thing. But in
Mm.
reality, it's not. And you really need to take your time to dissect that. And we actually offer a service, which is a quote comparison service, which means we will sit down with you and look at the quotes and do a comparison, which is, by the way, quite difficult because these quotes a lot of times are just an Excel sheet or it's just a simple, is floors
Piece of
included?
paper and
Yes.
pen.
Yes, exactly. So it makes it difficult to see the differences between things, like
Mm.
the installation methods. Are you, for whatever, let's just say your hardwood floors. Are you just screwing them down or are you screwing them or nailing them down or are you also nailing them and gluing them down?
Hmm.
Little things like this can actually make a big difference. You got to pay for the glue. There's a little bit extra on the install. So now in turn, our quote is higher than the competitor, but that floor is not going anywhere, right? But if your nails start to tell them, you might see his floor start to move around, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
it can be very difficult, which is why it's important to, even if you don't have it like us, we'll do the comparison for you. But if not, do it yourself and ask these questions, do your research and have a good understanding of exactly what you are getting. Because a lot of times, if it's that much cheaper, they're cutting corners. And people need to really be aware of that in 2025 and the situation that we're dealing with right now.
So I want to get a renovation done, but I'm not in an area that you service. Can I still call you to get a quote comparison done?
Yes, yeah, you can.
Cool.
We will work with, like, even if you're outside of our service area, even if you're somebody from whatever, I don't care. But you call us, we will help you one way or another. We'll give you the advice. We can do a quote comparison. At the end of the day, like I told you, it's the business here is not only about making money. It's a lot about helping people. It's something that we really pride ourselves on at Big Dog is trying to make a difference. And if that just means hopping on a phone call or a quick Zoom call for 30 minutes and breaking down a quote for you, then that's all we need. That oftentimes will actually lead to more business
Mm.
because, you're building word of mouth, you're building relationships, and who knows, this guy could be from the States, but who knows, he might have a cousin that lives in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
And so we helped him with his quote comparison. He loved the consultation and the advice that we gave. And then, now he's telling his cousin, hey, go work with these guys.
Yeah.
Obviously,
You
that's
know
not
what?
the only reason we do it, but it all comes together.
It does. It does. To your point, it is a small world and you never know how you're going to be able to impact somebody and what that's going to be leading them to.
That's it, man. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Final question for you. What do you think it means to be a homeowner in Ontario?
I think it's something different for everybody. I think people buy homes for different reasons. Some people might buy the home for an investment. Some people might buy the home because they're trying to build a family. But some people might buy a home just simply as a sign of success in their life. So it really depends on who you are. For me personally, my home was more bought as an investment property for the time being. And, in the future, obviously hoping to build a family one day, settle down in the home and build my family there. So like I said, I think it has different meanings for different people depending on where you're at in your life. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Riley. It means a
Yeah.
lot. Sharing your story, sharing your passion with us today. Where can people find you?
Pretty easy to find online. We're on Google. Big Dog Renovations. We're on Instagram at Big Dog Renovations. We're on Facebook, Big Dog Renovations 416. We are on a number of platforms like Homestars. You can also just pick up the phone and give us a call at 647-468-8226. So yeah, lots of ways to get a hold of us, lots of ways to find us. We got lots of stuff you can check out online.
Amazing. Riley, thank you so much for joining us here today at the Ontario Homeowners Show. It has been an immense pleasure having you here. Folks, that's a wrap on this episode of the Ontario Homeowners Show. Now, I don't know what resonated with you the most, what stood out the most, but here's what I hope you took away. The people we bring on the show are the real change makers. They're out there doing the work that makes real life better. One home, one family, one conversation at a time. If that's something you want more of, hit subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. New episodes drop weekly. And if you want the highlights, the tools, the guest takeaways straight into your inbox, go to ontariohomeownershow.ca and send us your email and name. Thank you for listening. See you next time.